So here's another way of saying this. This one I like a lot. So I'm kind of a Peter Kreeft fan. Peter Kreeft says this. So have you guys ever, like, you put on a shirt and you start buttoning it and you get the first button wrong, right? Even if you get all the rest of the buttons perfectly, in perfect order, if that first one is wrong, you come out into the party and you look like an idiot, right? You do, because and you only missed one. Everything else, boom, 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 boom. You missed one and you got it wrong. Well, after that, of course, it doesn't work. So the first hole is all important. So what do I want to talk to you about tonight? First, I'm just going to talk to you about very briefly the first 3 holes of the Regnum Christi shirt. That's what I'm going to talk to you about. Because, as you'll see, I'm going to do it very briefly. I'm kind of condensing that talk into a little 10-minute introduction, because I consider Christian militancy as one of those 3 buttons. Okay. So the briefest way of doing this is going to the Regnum Christi text that the church just approved not too long ago. If you go to the statutes of the Regnum Christi Federation approved by the Vatican in 2019, you'll see some texts that are like super clear. Okay, super clear. But there's still one problem, even when you go to texts that are simple and clear. Whenever we approach a text, no matter what text, human text, and try to understand it, we have to interpret it. And that is the drama of human language. It goes for anything that is written, even the Bible. It can seem very clear, but it has to be interpreted. As Joseph Pieper wrote in his excellent little book, The Silence of St. Thomas, I don't know if you can see that, you who are back there, but it says, in the interpretation of a text, what is plainly decisive, and yet by no means easy as this, to grasp those basic assumptions which, remaining unexpressed, nevertheless permeate all that is actually stated. To discover, so to speak, the hidden keynote that dominates whatever has been explicitly said. So what I'm going to try to do right now, see what Joseph Pieper just said, I'm going to try to apply that to what I think is like the most basic number in our statutes. It kind of reveals to us our first 3 buttonholes. Okay, that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to get to those basic assumptions that may not be stated explicitly, but are there underneath them, and they give it all of its meaning. So, following me? Kind of, right? That's okay. We'll get there. Okay, so after some introductory numbers in chapter 2 of the Statutes of Regnum Christi, and it's titled, actually, this chapter, it's titled Spiritual Foundations. So that's what we're looking for, foundations, principles. We come upon number 8. And there it is. Some of you might know that by heart, but all of you Regnum Christi members know this very well. Hi, Jackie. So, here it is. I will read it for you. To fulfill our mission, we seek to make present the mystery of Christ who goes out to people, reveals the love of his heart to them, gathers them together and forms them as apostles and Christian leaders, sends them out, and accompanies them as they collaborate in the evangelization of people and of society. So what I want to do now, just as a little introduction, and then we'll move on to militancy, I want to apply what Joseph Pieper just said, that we're going to interpret this. And we're going to try to get to the bottom of it, like, well, what does that really mean? Like, what are the principles underlying that number that give it substance and meaning? Okay. Trying to, in his words, discover the hidden keynote that dominates whatever has been explicitly written. So here we go. We're going to break it down first. If you just look at that, it says, to fulfill our mission, we seek to make present the mystery of Christ. I'm going to call that number 1. 2, who reveals the love of his heart to them. It's number 2. And 3, gathers them together and forms them as apostles and Christian leaders. 3. There we go. We're going to break that number down into its 3 basic parts. So that's what the text basically says, okay? But so here's my humble but correct opinion, okay? That's what the text says, but what's hidden in those 3 texts are, in my opinion, the three most important concepts for Regnum Christi person spirituality. And since most of you guys are Regnum Christi and you're interested in this is like super important. It's like the first principles of everything. Okay. And here they are. I don't know if this is going to work. I'm not very techie. Oh, there it comes. Number one, Christ-centeredness. When we say in that number, to fulfill a mission, we seek to make present the mystery of Christ. I'm sure what that is referring to is Christ-centeredness, or what we sometimes call Christocentrism. Make present the mystery of Christ. Two, the second one there, who reveals the love of his heart to him. Charity. And number three, is this working or is it not working? Three, militancy. Gathering them together and forming them as apostles and leaders. So those three things, ladies and gentlemen, I think are the most important things for Regnum Christi person spirituality. Just that. You don't have to complicate it anymore. You know, you don't have to look at like huge diagrams with arrows going all over the place. Just 1, 2, 3. I went to Chicago recently. So Lucy said that I came from Chicago. I was there for 8 years, and I went to dinner with the locality director there. She's Joanne Conover, if anybody knows her. Splendid woman, Joanne, right? And her husband, Dave, who's a riot, you know? So anyway, so we went and I sit down to the table and and we're talking a little bit about Regnum Christi. He says, Father, you don't have to tell me anything about Regnum Christi. It's CCM. CCM. I said, what's CCM? He said, you told us that. Christ-centeredness, charity, militancy, CCM. I've been in the Legion, as Lucy just told you, since 1985. How many? That's like 27, 28 years. 37. I wish it was 27, 37. And I think that's probably even longer than the most old timers out there, right? And now there's a few of us who'll be already, don't admit it. Anyway, since that first stage that I joined the candidacy program, I have been formed in legionary spirituality. I've lived it. I've worked long and hard to understand. I mean, it's my life. I don't like to be in something that I don't understand, right? And so you work at it and try to understand it, and you try to say, why am I here, and what am I supposed to do, etc. The Legion, of course, is part of the Regnum Christi family. It was the first part, historically speaking. And to a large degree, our spirituality is your spirituality. It's applied differently, but these three things are the same for us. Same for you, same for the consecrated, I would say. Maybe Dara, you guys will tell us something else, but if they tell you something else, anathema seat. No, no, sorry. I did not meet that. Oh, okay. So, but what I'm trying to say, I think I can say that whoever's been in Regnum Christi for a long time knows how important these three principles were for us forever. You know, Christ-centeredness was drilled into us from the first day. So was charity, always charity. Charity, we were told that so often that we got sick of it almost, but it worked in our novitiates. It worked. And militancy was like omnipresent. I mean, I know this is true, that most of us young men who joined back in the 80s, and I ask any of those fathers you used to know, you know, those Martin Connors and those John Hopkins and all those guys you used to know. You ask them why they entered? Because it was like this cool military branch of the church, you know, the priests, you know, and that like really super, well, it's not only reason, but well, I could go into a long of it. Recent, I don't want to get off topic because I want to keep this thing tight, but recently, about 5 years ago, they actually did a survey of the young legionaries who are entering, the young ones who get all these new texts that aren't always so clear. And it was like 5 years ago, and it was the third year, what we call the humanist brothers. They're doing their humanities study. And they were asked the key thing that brought them into the Legion of Christ. You know what it was? For a vast majority, I'm not making this up, it's militant character, right? You have to understand it correctly. That's what we're going to do. But anyway, these concepts, they were always there and they were all over the place. and others came and went. There's more holes in the Regnum Christi shirt than 3, and I admit it, right? There's probably 100, but we're talking about the first 3, like the ones you want to get super sure so that everything else falls in place. Okay, so this is what I think. Since our renewal process began about 10 years ago or 15 or whatever it is now, these concepts have at times been obscured by attempts to clothe our spirituality in a more modern and accessible language. That may have its advantages. It probably does. But if that language is also less precise, then very soon we run the risk of putting the first button in the second button. Yeah. We run the risk of confusing what is special about Regnum Christi or Legionary of Christ, or even what I would say is the consecrated. And we can even forget, kind of. Why do we forget? Because we don't talk about it anymore. And we're limited human beings. So if you don't talk about it, it kind of fades away. Fades away. Here's an example of this. Imagine, I mean, I'm starting to get to know a bunch of you people. So imagine if I came in here and I hadn't shown you this, and I said, okay, tell me the 3 most important points of this Regnum Christi spirituality. And I wonder how many people would have like jumped to their feet and say, oh, I know that. It's super easy, Father. I bet nobody would probably. Well, I did that same thing to a group of legionaries about 3 or 4 years ago. Okay, just tell me what nobody dared raise their hand. These were legionaries, been in Legion for 20 years. You know why? Because they were confused. Because we get confused, because we jumble up our language. It's not precise anymore. It's not clear. And then I said, well, I'll tell you what it is. It's the CCN. it's Christ-centeredness. Oh, of course, everybody knows that. Exactly. It's charity. Oh, well, everybody knows that. And it's militancy. And then someone said, well, Father, maybe we better talk about that one, right? But at least the first 2, they immediately recognized it. It's like what Pieper said there. You have to get underneath these words that are nice. They're good words, I think, right? To understand what's really there and in inspiring them. Yeah, so that's why since the last days of my days in Chicago, and since I've been here, this is one of my goals. And I say it very humbly because I'm nothing special at all, But I believe this. This isn't Father Bruce. This is what I think Regnum Christi is, This isn't Father Bruce. This is Regnum Christi. So I want to tell you guys what Regnum Christi is. Isn't that important? Yeah. So I thought it was a worthwhile goal to make those pillars. Sometimes I call them that. The 3 legs on the Regnum Christi, 3-legged stool. Here's the 3 legs. Boom, boom, boom. Father Martin. Father Martin and I, we just spent almost a week together pounding out some of our Regnum Christi assignments, right? That was so cool. So anyway, I think that's what our number 8 of the Regnum Christi is all about. And I think that are the 3 basic things for us. So today, that's end of introduction, because I wasn't asked to speak about this. I was asked to speak about militancy, but I kind of had to set it up so that you guys can see why I think it's so important. Because I think it's number 3. And by the way, I don't think it's number 1. Christ-centeredness is number 1. And if you put militancy before Christ-centeredness or charity, then you have problems. It's not Christian militancy anymore. It's belligerency, or it's war for war's sake, or it's, fussing for a fight or something like that. You got to keep things in order. Order is important, but you can't start omitting things because it's not very politically correct to say that anymore. That's what I think. Okay, so the servants of the apostles, they asked me to talk about militancy, so let's do it. I don't know if you remember, but if you still have a text of the old Regnum Christi manual, you go to number 42, you know what it said? The old one? You remember that? Regnum Christi is a militant movement of apostolate. All of us who joined the Legion of the Regnum Christi, we knew that by heart 1,000,000 times, backward and forward. So, I mean, it's the same God and it's the same us. So how can that change? I don't think it can change. Maybe our interpretation of that word can change. Maybe we can make sure it's in its correct order. It's probably some of the problems, at least the Legion got into, and we did get into problems and we made mistakes. So we got our order mixed up. But as they always say, you don't throw out the baby with the what? Yeah, the bathwater. Yeah. You don't throw it out. Anyway, we had that drilled into us. Well, I think that truth hasn't changed. Only the textual language around it has. And as I said at the beginning of this talk, we have to know how to interpret those texts. So let's go to the text in Regnum Christi statutes, which mostly talks about this today. Now, these are the approved texts. There it is, the big one. Number 10, a way of self-giving. This is right out of your statutes. I'm going to read it because it's kind of small and I don't know if you can see it back there, okay? The personal experience of Christ's love produces an interior urging in our hearts that impels us to passionate self-giving in order to make his kingdom present. Caritas Christi urget nos, which means in Latin, the charity of Christ presses us on. This passion moves us to take on a way of living that is characterized by one, accepting that following Christ includes spiritual combat. The struggle marked by perseverance and trust in the Lord in the face of the reality of evil and sin in one's own life and in society, moved by the power of love to the extreme. 2, undertaking with a magnanimous, enthusiastic, and creative heart the actions that made the kingdom present in greater depth and extent. Parentheses. My first talk I gave here when I came here to the Regnum Christi, I gave one on magnanimity. And Doc Gallagher grabs me at the end of the talk. He says, Father, I can't even pronounce that word. Magnanimity. And 3, going out to address the most pressing needs of the world and the church. 4, facing challenges with courage and boldness in our personal lives and in the apostolate. These are great lines. And it's not only for legionaries. This is all Regnum Christi. This is statutes for you, the consecrated, and us. So nobody escapes, 5, making the most of the opportunities that arise in life to proclaim the love of Christ with Christian audacity. 6, fulfilling the responsibilities we assumed and striving to give the best of ourselves, both in our formation and our work. Now, in all honesty, as I've said, excuse me for those who have seen parts of this talk before, because I've been preaching to the men for a year now. They've probably seen some of this before, but in all honesty, I'm quite content with that number. It includes many aspects of militancy that are indispensable preconditions of a Regnum Christi member. If you're not Regnum Christi and you think about joining, which I hope you do, or if you already are a Regnum Christi member and you want to be an authentic member, you have to accept as an essential part of your Christian lives, spiritual combat, and the struggle marked by perseverance, magnanimity, enthusiasm, creativity, willingness to go out and face the most pressing needs of our church today. Michael Lambert, he came up to me and said, Father, right? Pride Month is coming June. We're going to go out and meet those guys, right? There we go. There we go. Willingness to go out and face the most pressing needs of our church today. 4, being as seriously responsible for your commitments as any other commitments you have, etc. So if I or we are quite content with that number, well, what's the problem? Why make a big deal about this little word militancy? If that's pretty good, or why even bring up the topic of militancy if in essence it's contained in that number right there? The answer to the question is why I wrote this little book. It's not even a book, it's an essay. It's about, 15,000 words, and it's not very long. You want to look at a book, you go to Father Martin's Amazon. That's why I say it's so. An answer to that question is also contained in that essay, and of course I can't talk about that whole essay; it would take too long, right? But to put it really briefly, why I think it's a big deal, I want to read you just an abbreviated quote from this essay. I don't have it here because it's too long. Can you bear with me and listen here? This is what it says. Following common usage, we can define Christian militancy as that quality or attitude of being engaged in combat or aggressively active in the cause of Christianity. That's like almost straight out of the Webster Dictionary, by the way. This definition seems straightforward and quite positive. Nevertheless, searching for this concept in contemporary Christianity, we find a puzzling phenomenon. When faced with the concept of militancy, most Christians today do not feel gratitude and recognition, but distrust. Something about militancy does not seem quite right in the context of authentic Christian spirituality. Jesus teaches us that meekness, peace, forgiveness, and love are the necessary paths to walk if he desires to enter the kingdom. Does not a common sense understanding of militancy and its supposed sisters, violence and belligerency, fly in the face of these teachings? Finally, I'll finish the quote here. This distrust also was, and still perhaps is, present in many members of the Legion of Christ and the Regnum Christi movement, and was especially noticeable in key moments of the recent renewal process of the movement. Though the term militancy was nearly omnipresent until then in our official documents and everyday culture, it was nowhere to be found in the newly approved texts of the constitutions of the Legion of Christ. The other institutions of the movement have also shied away from using the term, right? Now, that's not exactly precise because in our constitution, it's mentioned once in number 104, like right in the middle. Like really fast, and then don't talk about it anymore. And it's all. And once when I was given this talk, a legionary, an eminent legionary, stood up. He says, "Father, that's not true. It's in our Christus Vita Vestra, which is our ratio. Ratio, what's it called? Il ratio. Yeah. It's a secondary document that tells us what our spirituality is, right? So that is true. But first of all, that came out like 5 years after the official documents, and it is a secondary document, it's not a primary document. And secondly, it's mentioned twice, and it's like a 900 number book, right? Charity is mentioned a lot. Christ-centeredness is mentioned a lot. Militancy is mentioned in 2 numbers. I looked it up. No, okay. So, and well, this is another thing. The story of the Constitutions of the Consecrated. Actually, this new book needs to be updated because then I was actually praising the Consecrated because they were the only group of all the branches of Regnum Christi, legionaries, lay people, consecrated, laymen, that had kept that in one of their numbers of the Constitution. They talked of Militia Christi. Well, it was pretty darn close, you know, the militia of Christ. And so I said, well, maybe the consecrators were the only ones that had enough freedom to do that. All the rest of us were so afraid to do it, so they just put it in. So I was praising them, but in their latest constitution, it was taken out. I think for the same reasons it was taken out of ours. So, so yeah, so there we go. The other, if that's true, what am I saying, you guys? If this is true, the militancy is number 3 for us. And, you know, I ask you guys who've been in Regnum Christi a lot of time, ask yourselves, is it true or not? We know it's true. Everybody knows it's true. Every legionary knows it's true. But nobody talks about it really, you know? It's like, it's a little bit, it's incorrect, politically incorrect to talk about it. I think that's something grave and important for all Regnum Christi members. Why? Because you have to have at least your first principles. They have to be really clear and super precise. You know, I can't get into this, but I think it's rule number 9 of Jordan Peterson's 12 rules for life. And what is, you remember what he says? Be precise in your speech. You got to nail those words. Words matter, you know. It's what permits us to, because our words permit us to have an identity. And that identity has to be clear and agreed upon and lived. So when I gave this little talk to Lucy and Bev Stone and the group of ladies there, what we used to call second degree, right? And now we call it something else, but it's basically the same thing. So I just gave a talk kind of on this, and I could tell they like loved it, right? They really liked it. I wasn't so sure exactly why they liked it so much, but they liked it. And I said, but I'm not saying anything new. It's just, I'm really not. I'm not. You just brush away a little bit the cobwebs. There it is. Yeah. There it is. That's why I'm preaching here tonight, because the ladies asked me, you know. If the men would ask me, I don't know if I would have done it. But So I don't want to repeat everything I wrote in that essay, but that essay, this thing is all about that. It's the battle for words. It's the battle for words in the Regnum Christi. And because the battle for words is the battle for identity. The battle for identity is the battle for your soul. You know? Yeah. So, what's this? I don't even remember what it is. Oh, okay, there it is. Yeah. I didn't know the ladies were going to bring some of these books. So I can't go over this whole essay, and I don't want this to go too long. So I'm going to go over 4 topics I mentioned in this essay. There's more, but I'm just going to go over 4. I'll try to go through them fast. If anybody has to go, just go. I won't be insulted, okay? First, the mystery of Christian. Let's see. I think I'm one behind. Oh, there it is. Here's the 4 topics we're going to see. First, the mystery of Christian militancy. Second, papal testimony in favor of the militancy for Regnum Christi. Third, the importance of giving things and ideas the correct name. Fourth, the chief characteristic of Christian militancy. The mystery. The title of this essay for me was important. It's not just about militancy. It's not even about Christian militancy. It's about the mystery of it. Why? What is a mystery? Well, the Catechism of the Catholic Church never defines a mystery, but it does make it clear that a mystery in its strict sense is something that cannot be known by reason alone. According to the church, only revelation opens up a mystery and makes it accessible to us. So first of all, it can only be known by revelation. Therefore, by faith, you have to approach it in faith. There's another aspect of mystery that can help us to understand its nature better that I really like. Okay. Oh, that's the Catholic Church. I'm kind of, okay, yeah. So this is what the church says in Catholic Catechism. It's a mystery of faith, one of mysteries that are hidden, which can never be known unless they are revealed by God. They have to be revealed. But this is really cool. The English word mystery comes from the Greek word mysterion, which means the same thing as Greek mystery. Okay, it's something hidden, a mystery. But the root of mysterion is the word mio, M-U or M-Y-O. That means literally to shut the mouth. It really does. Mio, it's like, oh. Or if I would give you the imperative of the word mio, miete or something like that, I can't repeat it here in polite society. That's what it actually means. And in its most profound sense, a mystery is not only that which can only be known through revelation, but which cannot be spoken, at least at first. You have to shut your mouth, because it cannot be known until lived. No? A mystery in its fullest sense is then something true, but that evades our understanding until it has been revealed to us and until we've been able to experience it, so to say, by living inside it. That's why the basic fundamental truths of our faith, they're all mysteries. The Paschal mystery of Jesus, right? Passion, death, resurrection. Like, to really understand that, you have to suffer. You have to get into the mystery, The Holy Trinity. Who can understand such a thing? Who understands it? Saints. The saints are the best people who understand, because they've gotten inside that mystery and they've been able to live it from the inside. The best theologians are the ones that listen to the saints. And that's not me who's saying that. I'm borrowing from, for example, that was said by von Balthasar. He said that. Yeah, there it is. It goes without saying that my work, this is von Balthasar, a super smart and erudite theologian, seeks in particular to stay true to the thought of the great saints of the theological tradition. Augustine, Bernard, Anselm, Ignatius, John of the Cross. Lovers are the one who know most about God. The theologian must listen to them. Well, it's the same idea, To really understand a mystery, you have to get inside it by living it. Okay, so, very well. The same thing can be said of all Christian mysteries. And it's one of the reasons why the pious grandmother, who's never studied a class of theology in her life, can be a much better mentor in the faith than a PhD theologian from Fordham. In fact, I would trust the grandmother more. I really would. You know why? But that's theologically sound. It's sound because of this. It's not sound because it's kind of funny. It's sound because you got to get inside the mystery if it's a revelation. Not to learn things technical about theology. The Fordham PhD guy would probably do better, right? But to get inside the faith, It's a different thing. So, but we're talking about the Christian virtue of militancy. And today, to decide to try to begin living. So what am I saying all this for, ladies and gentlemen? Because I'm saying if you want to understand the mystery of militancy, you have to live it. And most people don't want to live it anymore because it seems bad. You know, like the mystery of Jesus' humility, that's okay. Everybody's fine with that. The mystery of Jesus's meekness, I'm all in. Jesus helping the poor, there I am right there. Jesus militant, like, I'm not so sure. Is that really true? But you're not going to understand it unless you live it. That's another reason why I wrote this book, to tell you guys, hey, it's okay to live it. You know, it's a good thing to live it. It's a beautiful thing to live it. We should live it, you know? Yeah. Militancy, as we have already noted, is often at best distrusted and at worst vilified. If we must live militancy to understand it, but everyone else considers it a bad option at the best, who's going to dare to even begin to live militancy? In other words, who's going to dive into that pool when it seems a little pestilent? It's a little dangerous. It's like the kid says, I'm not diving. I'm not getting into that mystery. It's not even Christian. Of course you don't dive. And so you don't understand it. And so you don't do it anymore. No. Let's just take this as assuming I go to the second point. If Christian militancy is a Christian virtue, then it's a virtue that must above all be accepted as a mystery. If it is to be understood fully, therefore, it must be lived. And this essay was an attempt to describe authentic Christian militancy so that it would be attractive again. And people say, oh, it really was one of Christ's main characteristics. And it was, but I can't go into it today. No, I'll go into it just barely, but you know, I can't make this talk last forever, right? No. It was an attempt to describe a contrary view of the commonly held contemporary understanding of militancy, which normally is super pejorative, as you all know. No? Discovering more completely what it is and what it is not can help us to accept Christian militancy and its positive usage, encourage us into its mystery, and dive in. If you say, oh, that's beautiful, that's a great ideal, then I dive in. No. That's also why I'm giving this talk tonight, so you guys dive in. Yeah. Second, remember I said I was going to go through the second, papal testimony in favor of militancy of Regnum Christi. Our second theme is that the clear and overwhelming papal testimony in favor of militancy in the Regnum Christi movement. Yeah, you don't get any higher in authority. No, you do. God's first. Second, the Bible. But as far as like interpreting the Bible and everything and applying it, it's the Pope. I'm sorry. No, he's not absolute. He's not unconditional, but he's the next. Right, Joe? Yeah. So this is what I want to say briefly. 4 of the last 7 popes specifically named militancy as the specific characteristic of legionary spirituality, and thus by implication also of Regnum Christi spirituality. 4 of the last 7. Pope John Paul I didn't, but he didn't have time. Okay. Pope John the 23rd did not, but as far as I know, but well, he simply didn't. He did visit our center. Pope Francis did not either, which is easily explained. But even he has, you know, a lot of people, hey, they have their questions with Pope Francis, but do you know even he advocated for the use of this term in his writings? Pope Francis? Did you know that? Like if Pope Francis can use it, Regnum Christi can use it. I mean, right? This is just one example. I'm going to read it. I didn't put it on my notes, but he says, this is Pope Francis. He says, here we take a further step. Our faith will be militant, and militant in a way that is fully conscious of the enemy. Our aim will be to defend the whole body and not just myself alone. All this gives us a sense of realism. People are known by the struggles they wage. But to the extent that they are ignorant of the reasons for our struggle, their efforts are lost. You know who he's talking about? The first evangelizers of the New World. He said, those guys knew how to be militant. This is Pope Francis, huh? I finished. I mean, the first evangelizers on the continent gave the Native Americans knowledge of why they should engage in spiritual combat. Cool. That's Pope Francis, but he didn't say it about us, so we'll leave. Here's the four, okay? Here's the four popes who said something about us. Regnum Christi Spiritual. Pius XII is the first guy there. Quoting from the Song of Songs 6:4, stated that the Legion of Christ should be like an army in battle order, sicut castrorum acius ordinata. I think much of the development of the spirit of Christian militancy in our congregation comes from that original papal insight. Recently, I was with Manuel Carballo. You guys know him, Manuel? And he contested that a little bit, and I think he was right. He says, well, I think it came from the Cristero Revolution in Mexico. And we had a really great talk about all that in his place. But I even admit, and this I'm not trying to take it from a historical point of view, it's more like from a textual, a little bit from a different thing. But that's a whole different thing that could be explored, and it's really cool. Manuel is like his grandfather was a Cristero general or something, you know. That's kind of cool. Anyway, we had a talk in his house about that, but we won't go into that now. St. Paul VI, second one there. At the end of his general audience on January 2, 1974, he turned to a group of newly ordained legionary priests and spontaneously, no papers in their hands, he said, "You are legionaries, that is not sedentary people or just lookers on, but men who give shape to reality with your vigor and give Christianity an expression that is distinctive to it, militancy." Legionaries, that means you do battle in the name of Jesus. May God bless you and always preserve this characteristic quality in you. May God always preserve this characteristic quality in you. He doesn't say, hey, if you guys want to follow that, you know, vote on it in a few years, see what you think. Yeah. Third, in his official discourse to the members of the Second General Chapter of 1992, St. John Paul II wrote this, so it's pretty official. It was the General Chapter's task to seek the implementation of your specific charism approved by the Church in its time. This fidelity to your charism should not be static, anchored in the past, but rather dynamic, capable of adapting successfully to the diverse cultural and social areas to which the Lord is calling you. Therefore, your work in the church should be realized through militancy. I mean, why didn't he say charity or something, or humility? Understood as the dynamic and ardent apostolic mission with which your institute was born. He didn't mention anything else. I mean, it's like, it's so weird. I mean, he could have mentioned any virtue there. I mean, he's the Pope, he could say whatever he wants. No, he can't. But, yeah, but he mentioned that one. And the fourth one, Benedict XVI, in the communique of the Holy See regarding the apostolic visitation of the Congregation of the Legionaries of Christ, which was not favorable to her. I mean, they bashed us, right? That's a whole nother story. We won't get into that. But even in that, that's 2010, it says this: the need to redefine the charism of the Congregation of Legion of Christ, preserving its true nucleus, that of the Militia Christi. That's what the consecrated had in their constitutions for a while, which characterizes the apostolic and missionary action of the church. He didn't mention anything else that he wanted to make sure we conserve. Just that one. Militia Christi. And that's, for some reason, that's the one we decided to throw out. So you tell me. Isn't it true? I'm not exaggerating, right? I mean, it's just textual stuff. I think all of these texts point to an obvious conclusion, at the very least, in the minds of four great and recent popes, in the very heart, and they're not talking about like secondary things, they're talking about the very heart, characteristic quality, its true nucleus. I mean, you're talking about principles, right? At the very heart of the charism, the Legion of Christ, and Regnum Christi is Christian militancy. Okay, third. The third topic I wanted to pose is the importance of giving things or ideas the correct name. Okay, I'm going to use a literary example of this from the greatest of English writers, William Shakespeare, whom someone once called, most rightly, our best schoolmaster. And so in his famous tragedy, Romeo and Juliet, which we all know, Juliet, as she's leaning over the balcony, we all know this one, right? She's leaning over the balcony, says to herself, "What's in a name? That which we color rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Why do we have to color rose a rose?" And do you know what the answer to that question is? It's a puzzling question, no? What's in a name? Like, what difference does it make? If I call a rose a peach, it's still going to smell the same, right? Well, Juliet thinks that there isn't much difference in it at all. The feud between the two families, the Montagues and the Capulets, she says, is just a matter of names. And she doesn't have to worry about it when it comes to Romeo. In fact, later she will say, "'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thyself, though not a Montague." What's a Montague? Like, who cares about our names? So Romeo would, were he not Romeo called, retain that dear perfection which he owes without that title. So that's Juliet, but she's probably 15. 15-year-old girls, sometimes they make mistakes, right? Right? She says it doesn't matter. And what does Shakespeare tell us? It matters a lot. In fact, it's a life and death question, because they tried to say it didn't matter. And at the end of the play, they're both dead because of their names. It's exactly, I think that, in fact, if you want to dig in Romeo and Juliet, but we're not going to give a talk on Romeo and Juliet, I think it's really a play, not so much about romance, it's about name calling and the importance of names, I think. Perhaps I'm wrong, but Shakespeare teaches us, in fact, there's a lot of name. In his excellent book, The Philosophy of Tolkien, in the sub-chapter entitled, "Are There Right and Wrong Words?" Peter Kreeft put it this way: "What's in a name? In the name of Jesus, devils were exorcised, hell defeated, and heaven's gate opened for us. What's in a name? Everything. In the name, the whole world was created. The name was the word of God, the mind of God, the logos. What's in a name? Moses asked God that question at the burning bush, and God answered, I am." No? All I'm trying to say is that there's a lot in the words. Words matter, and they matter a lot. Here's what I wrote in this. Our understanding of a concept as singular and specific as militancy could be befuddled by the attempt to define around it, or substitute description of it in lieu of speaking and writing with simplicity and precision. Looking at a rose, for example, we could explain to our interlocutors, it is a plant of a genus of usually prickly shrubs with pinnate leaves and showy flowers, having 5 petals in the wild state, but being often double or partly double under cultivation. Or we could say, it's a rose. You know the difference that for a normal human being, he has to deal with 1 million problems in a day. You can't deal with that first one. Nobody cares about that first one, except for a scientist in biology. I mean, I got my rose garden out there. I got to deal with it, you know? I got to be able to put names on my roses without going to the encyclopedia every time. That's why you need clear, simple, common use names. That's why you got to pick your names right? We're too limited. If we were super geniuses that could roll this stuff through our head all the time, you know, we wouldn't need that, but we're not. So we need simple, clear terms. That's why in that number 10, I've said this almost as a joke, but actually I mean it. In that number 10 of the statues, I've told the men sometimes, they say, look, just take off that generic title, A Way of Self-Giving, to number 10, put militancy, and we're good. Problem solved. I'm glad like Father Sean and Father Bartunik aren't here. No, they would laugh. They would laugh. Anyway, as Peter Kreeft wrote in his book, Jesus Shock, which is a wonderful little book, nothing is more formidable and unconquerable than the church militant, but nothing is more sleepy and sheepish than the church mumbling. We don't want to mumble, Regnum Christi members. No? That's why it's so important to say things, name things correctly. The great Chinese philosopher Confucius, who was really a very smart guy, he didn't know Christ, but he was an excellent, very smart and very wise philosopher. He says, the beginning of wisdom is to call things by their proper name. No. Somebody asked, when he was asked what he would do if he were a governor, he said the first thing he would do would be to rectify the names of things. That's his first act of government. It's like, make sure everything has its correct name. That's so cool. I mean, I like that. Okay, so let me add just one more thing about the importance of words, which is not in my essay. No, you know what? I think I'm going to skip this because it's longer than I thought, this talk. Yeah. I'm going to skip that. Here, I'll show you what I was going to talk about, but I won't. It's so cool. Is that there's this Greek word in the Bible that Jesus, it's called logizomai, which means I offer you a name, and through that name, I word you into a certain reality type of thing. It's like Jesus did for Mary Magdalene. By saying you are forgiven, he actually produces almost a new person in that one by talking to her with these logizomai. It's a way of biblical talking that God does. Our language is creative, let's put it that way. That's why it's so important to say the right things, you know? When Jesus tells the prostitute, you are forgiven, he actually creates a new possibility for that woman. It's like creative, those words. That's what I was going to talk about, but I'm not going to talk about it. It's really cool though. I just mentioned that because it shows how true words used by honest and courageous leaders can actually bring into reality the identity that we're supposed to have. That's why I don't want to lose words that are important. You have to be courageous to use them, but you got to use them, because then people, even in their limited, busy days, they think, oh no, I gotta hold on to these principles, you know? Leadership, my friends, has to do with defining reality. And Christian leaders use this type of language, the shaping power of speaking and naming. That's why it's so important to use the correct words. Their power reshapes us. If no one uses the word militant anymore for Regnum Christi members, they will eventually lose their Christian militancy. I don't care what else you call it. No. If you take the word charity out of our constitutions and you put in there, be nice, or many other synonyms, because there's all kinds of a cluster of words around there, you're going to lose your charitable Regnum Christi members eventually. Yeah, or at least that they're not going to be so concerned with it. That's how a language works. That's what logizomai are. It's like I throw that word out there and I create the reality. Fourth, the chief characteristic of Christian militancy. So we could speak about many other aspects of the concept of Christian militancy, but those are in here, okay? But to end this talk, I would say that the most important of these concepts is that at the heart of Christian militancy, which makes it a virtue and not a vice, is the Greek term hypomone, which the men of Regnum Christi now they know it well because, okay. I just talked in the last evenings of reflection to the Regnum Christi men about Christian endurance. Well, I don't want to have to repeat that all here. So let me just summarize. In ancient Greece, this word came from two Greek words, hypo, which means under, and meno, which means to be present or to stand or remain. Under, stand, under. It's almost like understand, okay? Here it is. Hypomone. It's a word composed of two other Greek words, a prefix hypo, which means under, and the word meno, which means to stand, to remain, to be present. We hear this often, like hypo, like that guy is an example of hypothermia, under the heat necessary for a human being to live, under, hypo. Hypodermic needle, under the skin, hypo. And meno is, we use it in the word, for example, remain. I'm remaining here. I remain in my position. Well, that's what main means, okay? Anyway, I'm telling you all that because in ancient Greece, this word came to mean a hopeful endurance or constancy, an enduring patience. Patient endurance is what I told the ladies in my first talk. A steadfastness, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. A man with hypomone was faithful. He had solid ground on which always to keep his feet. And in the New Testament, it's a characteristic of a person who's faithful and loyal and does not swerve from this fidelity, even when faced with great trials or suffering. Okay? It's all over the New Testament. Scott was reading his New Testament the other day and he came upon the word patient. So he looked it up. He said, oh, Father, I found another one there. Yeah. It's all over, but it's always translated different, so we don't know. But like it's a super important concept in the New Testament. And what it means is that If I have this virtue, I persevere even under the greatest difficulty. Well, what I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, that is the chief characteristic of Christian militancy. It is the Christian soldier who's not going to move from his post. And he's there, and God willing, he does not move. He does not retreat. He does not give up ground. He perseveres. Oh. Gosh, there's so much I could do about, but I've already been talking an hour, so that's enough. But what I want to, for example, I had discovered this word many years ago. It's become my favorite word in the New Testament because it's all over the place. Do you remember St. Paul when he says in that very famous thing, love believes everything, hopes everything, supports everything, and endures all things? Well, that last verb is hypomone. Charity hypomones all things. It's like, it's the one thing that never gives up. Charity, the power of charity, it never gives up. It has staying power. It doesn't run away. So anyway, I developed this whole thing about hypomone, which you have all, if you're still in Regnum Christi, actually you practice this. You have, believe me. It's the endurance that you go on when you can say, I'm not moving. I don't care what happens. Yeah, because I'm here where God wants me to be. I thought of this as almost like unique to me. Well, it wasn't. And I found out two things that, so Benedict XVI talks about this in Space Halvey. And the guys know this because in my talk about Christian endurance, he talks about this word, just as I'm presenting it to you, and the contrary, which is hypostole, which means run away, because things are getting difficult. I run away, basically, right? So I thought, well, Benedict XVI, he talked about hypomone too. So at first I thought he stole my thought. No, I must be right, because see, I'm talking the same thing he is. But then recently I was reading another thing, and a book I already mentioned here a little bit. I'm reading because I read Tolkien this year. It was my Lenten resolution was to read The Lord of the Rings for the first time in 20 years. I did it, and I went down the Tolkien rabbit hole. Oh my gosh, there's so many books on him. But anyway, I'm reading this one called Fleming Rutledge, and you know what she says? She says the chief characteristic of the Hobbits, hypomone. She's a New Testament scholar. She says this: the endurance of the hobbits is called hypomone. It's one of the central marks of the Christian life. Hypomone can also be translated perseverance, steadfastness, fortitude, or patience. It's not a glamorous virtue like courage or valor. It sends off no fireworks, Regnum Christi members. Yet it is required of all who would fight the good fight, and there is no one, however lowly, who cannot serve in this way. Bilbo, the rather comical little peace-loving hobbit, is given 2 or 3 really heroic moments, but 98% of his journey there and back again is just putting one foot in front of the other, week after weary week. We will emphasize this much more when we come to Sam and Frodo in Mordor. No, I think that's so cool. And that's so true. And that's what I tried to get past this book, you guys. It's like, you know, because when we think of militancy, we think of all this bad stuff. No, you know what militancy is really? At the heart of it, it's hypomone. I mean, that's the chief characteristic. And there's no fireworks. There's no glamour. You know, it's just pure dogged perseverance. You know, like all you people who persevered in Regnum Christi through the whole Father Marcial debacle and all that. It's like for all of you who've been able to stay faithful to your marriages after the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Right? It's like my mom and dad, dear ones who just died last year, right? 64 years of marriage. Fought like cats and dogs until the very end. But they stayed together. They stayed together. Wonderful people, wonderful people. Yeah. So what I did, I couldn't get this. It's another story. I couldn't get, this is just self-published. So, but I sent it to Father John Connor. Father John actually read it, which is a miracle, you know, because he got a lot of stuff to read. He read it and he wrote me back. He said, Father, that's really good. I'm in agreement with it. And he says, and the reason I'm in agreement was that I think the only reason the Regnum Christi and Legion have even survived, this was about 4 years ago, is because we have the charism of perseverance, of patient endurance. Like you take all the blows and you just keep on going. Huh? So if the boss says it's okay, it's okay. Huh? Huh? If we could see within our Regnum Christi militancy this virtue that has neither glamour nor sends off fireworks, but is required for all who fight the good fight, I mean, who's going to object to that? No. But if we abandon the concept, I think it will be a long drawn out funeral toll for Regnum Christi. I really do. We will mature into mediocrity. Yeah. I think it's kind of after charity, after Christ-centeredness in charity, I think it's our secret sauce, and you can't lose your secret sauce. Ask any Italian cook, you don't lose the secret sauce, right? We can't afford to lose it. So let me quote from my essay. Christian militancy in its essence is neither destructive nor disrespectful, nor reckless, nor violent. It is charitable. And this is pure theology. This is solid theology, gentlemen. Now, another way of saying this, once the concept has been understood, is this. Christian militancy finds its most noble expression, its hypomonic structure. And it's the structure of this. Yeah. And you know why I can say that? Because it's what Jesus did. How did he most show his charity? Passion, death, resurrection. Passion, death. Patient endurance until the end. That was his main way of doing it. Yeah. So it's the very word Jesus actually used, this hypomone, in Luke 21:10. I love this verse. When this verse that we all know, by your perseverance you will save your souls. Perseverance is hypomone. By your hypomone you will save your souls. That's how important it is. No? So if this is all true, and I believe it is, we should believe in the mystery of Christian militancy and then practice it to the best of our capability. It's not reckless. It's not belligerent. I talk about that here. It's charitable, but it's courageous. It's certainly enduring. Okay? And then I think Regnum Christi's got a shot. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thanks for supporting me.